In previous episodes of this podcast, I have mentioned the terms total energy expenditure and basal energy expenditure several times, as they are fundamental to understanding human metabolism and weight management. To keep those earlier episodes less confusing and under 20 minutes in duration, I relied on your intuitive thinking to understand the context of those terms. Now, I am dedicating this entire episode to explaining these two vital concepts in detail, exploring how they are measured, how they change across our lives, and, most importantly, busting some widespread myths about the human metabolism that often lead to misunderstanding and frustration. My name is Milan Toma, and I am an associate professor at the New York Institute of Technology College of Osteopathic Medicine. This podcast is a pure synthesis of scientific studies published on this specific topic of energy expenditure, drawing directly from the most detailed research available. You can rest assured that this discussion will be without any hype, personal opinions, or misinformation, focusing strictly on the scientific evidence. To truly understand why we gain weight or why we lose weight, we need a clear and precise grasp of how the body utilizes energy. This is about more than just how much food we consume. It is fundamentally about how many calories we actually burn throughout the day. At the very heart of energy balance lie the concepts of total energy expenditure and basal energy expenditure. It is absolutely vital to establish the relationship between these two ideas right from the start. Basal energy expenditure, sometimes referred to as basal metabolic rate, is not some separate phenomenon or mysterious process distinct from total energy expenditure. Instead, basal energy expenditure is correctly defined as the largest component and also the most stable component of total energy expenditure. Understanding this foundational relationship is the first step toward dismantling common myths. Let's define total energy expenditure precisely. Total energy expenditure is simply the sum total of all the calories burned by the human body over the course of an entire day. This total is comprised of three primary and distinct components. First, we have basal energy expenditure, which, as we established, forms the foundation of the total. Second, there is the thermic effect of food, which represents the energy that is specifically required to digest, to absorb, and subsequently to process the various nutrients that we consume in our food. Third, and finally, we have physical activity energy expenditure, which accounts for the energy spent on all forms of movement, whether that movement includes structured exercise or just daily activities such as walking around, typing, or doing household chores. Of these three major components that make up the daily caloric burn, basal energy expenditure is overwhelmingly the largest contributor. Typically, in most healthy adults, basal energy expenditure accounts for approximately 60% to 70% of the total amount of energy used daily. Now, let's look more closely at basal energy expenditure, which refers specifically to the calories burned under very strict specific conditions. Basal energy expenditure is measured when the subject is at complete rest, when they are in a fasted state, and when they are at a thermoneutral temperature. It is often helpfully described as the idling cost of merely keeping you alive. This energy expenditure is the minimum required to maintain essential bodily functions, like breathing, circulating blood throughout the system, and maintaining a constant body temperature. Because basal energy expenditure represents this critical, life-sustaining energy requirement, it is strongly determined by several biological factors. The most significant determinant is your fat-free mass, which includes your organs and your muscle tissue. Other factors that play a role include your age, your biological sex, and your individual genetics. Therefore, it is important to reinforce that basal energy expenditure is not a distinct or separate process from total energy expenditure, but rather it is the primary component upon which total energy expenditure is based. Since I'm striving for a scientific and objective understanding, let me discuss how these measures are actually determined. The most accurate, gold standard way to measure total energy expenditure in humans who are living freely, that is, going about their normal daily lives, is a technique known as the doubly labeled water method. This technique involves the subject drinking water that contains stable isotopes of both hydrogen and oxygen. Scientists then track the elimination rate of these isotopes as they leave the body through various routes, including urine, sweat, and breath, over a period of several days. This process provides a precise and objective measure of a person's average energy expenditure, capturing their entire daily routine accurately. For basal energy expenditure, the measurement procedure is different, as it must adhere to those strict resting, fasted conditions. Basal energy expenditure is typically measured in a laboratory setting using a technique called indirect calorimetry. Indirect calorimetry calculates the body's energy use by precisely measuring the individual's consumption of oxygen and their production of carbon dioxide while they are completely at rest. These objective biomarker-based methods of measuring energy expenditure, both doubly labeled water for total energy expenditure and indirect calorimetry for basal energy expenditure, are absolutely vital. They are necessary because they overcome the well-documented limitations and inaccuracies inherent in relying on self-reported dietary intake data or self-reported physical activity data, which are notoriously unreliable. Relying on these objective measures provides a reliable foundation for truly understanding energy balance. One area where recent large-scale studies utilizing both the doubly labeled water method and indirect calorimetry have dramatically revised our fundamental understanding is in how energy expenditure changes across the human lifespan. There is a commonly held notion that metabolism just slows down gradually throughout adulthood. But the objective data tells a much more complex and surprising story. When we adjust for a person's body size and their body composition, the research shows that total energy expenditure and basal metabolic rate actually peak during infancy. Following that peak, the energy expenditure levels decline throughout both childhood and adolescence. They then reach remarkably stable adult levels by around the age of 20. This stabilization is perhaps the most surprising finding for many people. Contrary to what remains a very popular belief, the best available scientific evidence indicates that both total energy expenditure and basal metabolic rate remain remarkably stable from the age of 20 right up until the age of 60. This stability even holds true during periods of major physiological change, such as pregnancy. It is only after a person reaches the age of 60 that their metabolism genuinely begins to show a measurable decline. Even this decline is gradual. Total energy expenditure and basal metabolic rate drop by about 0.7% each year. By the time a person reaches the age of 90, their overall energy expenditure is roughly 25% lower than it was during their middle-aged years. These patterns of stability, followed by gradual decline after the age of 60, have been consistently confirmed across highly diverse populations, and even in groups of highly active individuals. The physiological reasons behind this age-related decline that occurs after 60 are rooted in body composition changes. The decline is largely due to the loss of fat-free mass, which includes important elements like muscle and high metabolic rate organs. There are also reductions in the metabolic rate of individual tissues themselves. This highlights a critically important point. Body composition, not merely age alone, is the major determinant of an individual's metabolic needs. Lean mass, specifically, is the primary, strongest driver of basal energy expenditure. Now, I must address some of the most common and persistent myths surrounding metabolism and weight. One of the most widespread myths is the notion that adult weight gain, particularly the weight gain experienced in midlife, is an inevitable result of a dramatic and sudden metabolic slowdown. This belief provides a simple, yet scientifically unsupported, explanation for why weight management often becomes more challenging in middle age. However, as discussed, the most rigorous scientific evidence from doubly labeled water studies overwhelmingly shows that once adjustments are made for body size and fat-free mass, metabolism actually remains stable from the age of 20 up to the age of 60. Instead of a metabolic change causing the weight gain, the best scientific interpretation is that weight gain in adulthood is primarily driven by gradual and often subtle lifestyle changes. These changes typically include decreases in overall physical activity, increases in calorie intake over time, and shifts in body composition specifically, gaining fat mass while losing precious muscle mass. While a true metabolic decline does occur in later life, meaning after the age of 60, it is a gradual process. This later life decline results both from the gradual loss of lean mass, which includes organs and muscle, and from reductions in the metabolic rate of these tissues. Another common misconception relates to exercise. Many people believe that structured exercise alone will boost metabolism dramatically enough to single-handedly prevent weight gain. It is true that physical activity is absolutely vital for overall health, and it certainly increases total energy expenditure. However, the direct impact of exercise on a person's overall energy balance is often smaller than anticipated. This benefit may not be realized unless the exercise is truly substantial and consistently sustained, and unless the energy expended is not subsequently offset by compensatory reductions in other activities or unintended increases in daily calorie consumption. Furthermore, it is vital to remember the components of total energy expenditure. The largest component, basal metabolic rate or basal energy expenditure, is determined mainly by the mass of organs and lean tissue. It is not significantly raised by exercise per se. This means that while exercise is beneficial and increases the portion of energy expenditure related to movement, it does not fundamentally change the resting burn rate determined by one's lean body mass. The accuracy of energy needs assessment also presents a point of refinement, particularly concerning older adults. Traditional equations that clinicians and nutritionists use to estimate energy requirements frequently overestimate the energy needs of older adults. This overestimation occurs because those traditional formulas were largely derived from data collected from younger, typically more active populations. More recent and validated equations provide approximations that are significantly closer to the actual energy needs, particularly for individuals over the age of 80. This detail has critical implications for clinical nutrition, public health guidance, and ensuring adequate but not excessive calorie intake for the aging population. A detailed understanding of the components, measurement, and stability of energy expenditure is truly vital. This knowledge is important for interpreting actual caloric needs, for setting realistic and achievable goals for weight management, and for designing interventions that have a real chance of succeeding. This understanding also helps explain why weight loss is so frequently more difficult to maintain than it was to achieve in the first place. As a person loses body mass, particularly lean mass, their basal metabolic rate drops. This reduction in the basal energy expenditure component subsequently lowers the person's total daily calorie needs. This reduced need for energy can potentially promote increases in fat mass later on, unless calorie intake and physical activity are also matched to the new, lower energy requirements. A clear understanding of total energy expenditure and basal energy expenditure is vital for anyone interested in effective weight management, pursuing healthy aging, or ensuring nutritional adequacy. Accurate estimates of energy needs are important for two main goals: preventing the widespread issue of obesity, and simultaneously preventing the risk of undernutrition, which is a particular concern among older adults and individuals undergoing changes in their body composition. By using up-to-date and scientifically validated equations, we can ensure that any dietary advice provided actually matches the individual's actual biological energy requirements. Recognizing that human metabolism is primarily stable until a person reaches their 60s allows us to shift the focus away from blaming a slow metabolism for midlife weight challenges. Instead, the attention should rightly be placed on addressing changes in lifestyle, modifications to the environment, and behavioral habits. To summarize these core takeaways, total energy expenditure accounts for all the calories burned daily, and basal metabolic rate, or basal energy expenditure, is its largest and most stable component. We should not blame a slowing metabolism for the weight gain often seen in midlife, because total energy expenditure and basal metabolic rate remain stable between the ages of 20 and 60 years. We must appreciate the importance of objective, accurate measurement techniques, such as the doubly labeled water method and indirect calorimetry, as they are vital for truly understanding energy balance and caloric needs. It is also vital to appreciate the fact that body composition, especially the amount of lean mass one carries, is the dominant factor determining energy needs, much more so than age alone. For older adults, utilizing modern, validated equations is necessary for accurately estimating their caloric requirements. Finally, while physical activity is invaluable for boosting overall health and does increase total energy expenditure, its effect on body weight management is highly dependent on achieving overall energy balance and successfully managing any compensatory changes in other components of the daily energy budget, such as changes in food intake. These insights, drawn directly from rigorous scientific research, should guide our approach to nutritional advice and weight management strategies. Understanding that metabolism is stable throughout the prime adult years and only declines gradually later in life, primarily due to changes in lean mass, provides a realistic foundation for effective, sustainable health and fitness goals. Thank you for joining me for this episode on total energy expenditure and basal energy expenditure. If you want to read more and explore the scientific evidence further, check out the studies on which this episode was based. The references to those specific studies can be found in the episode's notes.